Who would you rather? That is always the biggest fantasy football question. You're in the draft room. Which guy between this one and that one? We are going to answer that question today right here on the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Chris Welsh. I got two fantastic guests. What we're going to be doing, as I've always called them, player debates. Players of similar general range, maybe upside versus floor. There's so many different ways to discuss it. We're going running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends. We're even going to do some vets versus rookies. And we have got, of course, my podcast cohort during the football season, Andrew Erickson here, and someone I've never got to hang out with, but we became best friends behind the scenes and all of our similarities. It's Rich Hribar. Lord Reeves. Rich, what's up, man? It was great to meet you backstage, and I'm very excited to finally get to... I enjoyed talking about all of our geeky nerd comic book stuff, but it'll be good to talk about some other geeky nerd fantasy football stuff.
Yeah, the Venn diagram is very strong if you dip into these waters and talk to people. You know, do you like this one thing that's super nerdy? I bet you like these other things as well. So we're best friends now, after the last half hour of hanging out. So I can't wait to come hang out with you, get our kids together and, watch some X-Men 97.
Our mutual named children as well. That's the other thing we figured out. Yeah. And we got to give a little shout out as a behind the scenes things to our poor dude, Jake Seeley, the all-in kid who was going to be joining us here, and chaos arose. But Andrew Erickson heeded the call. He stepped up when it was needed, and what a great person we can have for the player debates, Erickson. You're gonna bring it. I know it.
I'm always ready to bring it. If I'm not, again, I was talking behind the scenes with you guys. If you're not ready to hop on a show, 5 minutes warning to talk about fantasy football in June, what are you doing? You got to be ready to go. And I also brought the graphic tee. So even though there is no Jake Seeley, there's another graphic tee being represented here. So, LFG, baby.
Is that a presidential dab? Is that like Washington dab?
The Patriots.
A Patriots dab.
Remember once upon a time, Cam Newton was on the New England Patriots as the quarterback. A season that I cannot wait to tell my children about that actually happened.
Very memorable season. Exactly. I'm not sure what those debates would have been back then, but we've got some good ones. So again, who would you rather? Big fantasy football player debates of 2025 with lots of positional stuff. We're going to be using ECR. So just want to remind everybody, Fantasy Pros Ranks, it's fantastic because you can go in and check whether it's PPR, half PPR. These are going to be, at least the ECRs I'm going to give you. This is based on half PPR, just a nice middle ground. But you can go through that. You can also check each individual analyst. You can make groupings, or the ECR itself, the expert consensus ranks, is everybody. It's a big old collection of all the ranks, averaging it out. That's what we're going to be using. That's what I'm going to be citing. You guys can find the ranks over at fantasypros.com/rankings today. You can peruse, you can have fun, and you can create your own player debates, and you can bring it out into the ether and let everybody vote on it and talk about it. But these are the ones we have today. So gentlemen, let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right into it. We're going to jump over to running backs, and we're going to be on the high end here. And I think this is actually a really, really good one. And this one actually took place in our Fantasy Pros world where we're doing a draft. Some of the analysts are doing it with some listeners, and Ryan Wormley had hit me up and said, hey, you're on the clock. I, with the 8th pick, took Ashton Jeanty, and he said, oh man, I almost took him, but I just decided Jahmyr Gibbs might have like a little bit more of that floor, but the Jeanty upside really gets me. Well, guess what, gentlemen? There is our debate. Jahmyr Gibbs, ECR RB3 versus Ashton Jeanty, who is RB5. But we have seen some hot takes on this channel, and we've obviously seen that there is a lot of people that want to just jump in and think he has the potential to be the RB1 for this year. So, Rich, let's start with you. Who would you rather in the first round running back debate, Jahmyr Gibbs or Ashton Jeanty?
I will say out of all the ones you put on the sheet, this was the one that kind of gave me the most pause. Like, when you see the names and the other ones that we'll go through, I kind of had a pretty definitive, this guy. But this one, and I think it's just because they're 2 first round picks, right? Like, you could see the upside angle for both. I do think that I would break the tie or semi-tie with Jahmyr Gibbs just being on an offense I believe in more. And you can also even poke some holes in that with no Ben Johnson, some potential team regression. Frank Ragnow just retiring as well. But we have seen a fleeting sample of Jahmyr Gibbs without David Montgomery be the best player in all of fantasy football. I mean, he has had a high floor. He's 16.9 PPR points per game with David Montgomery playing, and then 27.4 PPR points per game with David Montgomery off the field. He's finished RB8 and RB2 in points per game. It's really easy to make the case for Jeanty, though. Like, the one of the best, cleanest running back prospects going to a Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly offense, right? Like, I think the only things they're kind of really pulled down for him is that maybe the Raiders are a worse team. They definitely have a more questionable offensive line, even with the Ragnow retirement factored in. And the Raiders on our end do have our 24th ranked run schedule. But these running backs that have been first round fantasy picks have largely been pretty safe picks. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs was the RB12 most recently. Bijan Robinson that same year in 2023. Both those guys finished top 10 in overall scoring. Najee Harris was a top 5 pick. It was a top 5 finish and was an RB1. Really only Clyde Edwards-Helaire is like the only brick in like this range of like the past decade, because you had Saquon, Christian McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, and the ghost of Trent Richardson. All those guys finished as top 10 running backs and were taken as RB1s their rookie years as well. So this one was tight. I still kind of just give minor edges to Gibbs.
So, Erickson, do you think this one is as tight, or do you think it's a bigger window? Because the Gibbs argument is laid out right there. At the end of the day, there's another running back there. It's a big, powerful offense. We already know who Gibbs is versus Jeanty, who sky-high potential, and maybe he gets all the usage and pulls out, like the comparisons of Saquon rookie year valuations are kind of out there. What do you think? Obviously, the ECR is a little bit different, and it's there's a running back in between both of these guys. But when push comes to shove, who would you rather, Jeanty or Gibbs?
It's still Gibbs for me. He is my RB2. I have Jeanty as my RB3, so I do think that it is close. And I think that when you're looking at it from a volume projection, Jeanty should touch the ball more times than Gibbs, and then that gives him a path where he can outscore Jahmyr Gibbs. But I go back to offense environment. Even if the Lions take a step back, are the Raiders going to now lap them, essentially? Like, the Raiders offense we expect to be better, but is it going to be good enough where they're taking over the Lions, who have basically been a top 5 offense the last 2 seasons? And I always think back to, what's the cheat code with fantasy running backs? It's pass catching. It's receiving. We know Jahmyr Gibbs is an elite receiver out of the backfield. We're hoping that Jeanty can be that. What he did his sophomore year, he was used a lot more in the passing game. Last year, not as much. What is it going to look like in this Chip Kelly offense? Are they going to feed him a ton of targets? Geno Smith last year, they threw the ball a lot. We saw Ken Walker catch more passes. But the 2 years before that, there really wasn't a lot of running back targets. So I think that's still more of a projection, what he's going to be used like in the passing game. I'm optimistic that he'll see a role, but to the extent that it'll be better than Gibbs, I'm not as bullish on. And the fact that he turns into Daniel Tomlinson if Dave Montgomery misses any time, that's upside. Like, the single highest scoring player at the position, where Jeanty, yes, the volume should be there, but he still needs to make the jump to the NFL, steeper competition. And I think from a starting perspective, I expect Gibbs to, hit the ground running. And two, if this Lions offense does regress and Jared Goff kind of goes back to, sometimes what we saw him with the Rams, I feel like he's just going to look for Gibbs. He's going to find his check down option. I think Gibbs can really eat as a receiver. So I do think it's close. I'm definitely open to both guys. That's why I have them both inside my top 3, but I'm going to lean Gibbs as well.
I'm going to do this just really quick. We don't have to get into crazy analysis, but now I'm just quickly add a third name and just rank these players. Those two and Saquon Barkley. And Erickson, let's start with you.
Gibbs, Jeanty, Saquon Barkley.
That's what I wanted to hear. That's all I was going for. Rich, what do you think? We had Saquon Barkley in there. How does that list look?
Yeah, Saquon is a little tricky. Obviously, you're going to see a lot of, reports about the touch count that he had last year and the fall off that players with that many touches have. And, it's not necessarily that Saquon had a lot of touches. He's a running back. The next touch is always the one that matters, right? It's not necessarily the 482 he had the season prior. It's the next touch. I do think the Eagles are going to throw more. And the one thing about Saquon that happened last year that I don't think a lot of people realize is that he had the worst receiving usage of his career, which we thought was going to be in the range of outcomes with Jalen Hurts. And then the tush push was still a factor for him. So if you're not housing 50-yard touchdown runs at the same rate you were last year, which he did at a greater rate than anyone's ever done, and then literally since Jim Brown. So if you just have some regression in that long touchdown dependence and you're not catching passes and you're not scoring touchdowns, those eventually pull down your overall, production from a fantasy stance. Where even if Jeanty doesn't catch 70 passes, I think we have a pretty clean line where he's going to catch 30 plus, right? And that's still a question with Saquon in these full PPR formats. I think the format matters as well too, if you're kind of trying to break some ties too with those guys. Because do you think the other guys are just going to catch more passes than Saquon?
So was Barkley third on that list for you too?
Yeah, I think so. Just the way we play it, right? We don't overvalue. The last time the RB1 repeated was Priest Holmes in 2002, 2003. Like it just it doesn't happen. Chasing last year's RB1 very rarely works out.
All right, well, we'll chase a former RB1, and if I'm here, I'm going to have to bring up this guy. But I think this is a good debate, Erickson. Don't you give me that smirk. You tell me this is a good one. Bucky Irving versus Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey comes in at RB7, polarizing with injuries. Kind of feels like you love the value and you love him, or big no thanks. Versus Bucky Irving, who has been phenomenal. He is ECR RB10, so he is lower, as McCaffrey is ECR RB7. But the hype on Bucky Irving, where you want to get him. I don't know it kind of, I guess, depends on where you feel on Rachaad White as well. There's a little bit of a difference, obviously, in ECR, but it does feel like you've got to be in one direction or the other with Christian McCaffrey. Not a lot of people sitting on the fence. So, Rich, do you sit on the fence, or is it Bucky or Christian? Who would you rather in 2025?
No, I'm not on the fence with Christian McCaffrey. I still believe he's a play to win pick. I think a lot of people are treating him as just a play not to lose, avoid. But this is a player that we've seen is in an offensive environment where he's only going to be 29. Like, he's not dead. Granted, there's a risk versus reward factor because he has missed double-digit games in 3 of his seasons. But any season he's ever finished, he's been the RB1 or the RB2 in points per game. And he's in a system that they're pushing. The 49ers haven't given up on their window. Like, they're still going to try to win games, and they're going to maximize Christian McCaffrey, I believe. And you look at the games he played last year and the 2 games he played at Brock Purdy, 90% of the backfield touches, 20% of the targets, still went over 100 yards from scrimmage in both of those games. The 49ers are a team I believe are just collectively mispriced this year. Everything went wrong for them last year, and I think it's being over-factored into all the price point for all of these guys. I mean, including, not only was Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey all missed multiple games. Trent Williams also missed 7 games. It was a collective issue. And even with all that happening, they were second in the NFL in plays with 25-plus yards. They were 4th in expected touchdowns. They have by far our easiest passing schedule and rushing schedule this year. They're projected to be the 7th highest scoring team in the NFL. I still think Christian McCaffrey still has at least one more ride in the sunset while he's, active and playing. I get that that's a question mark, but I still want to play to win. And if you're going to give him at the 1-2 turn now, I feel like that's just really too tempting to pass up.
ECR is saying the same thing. It's agreeing with you. Erickson, do you agree? Who would you rather, Bucky Irving or Christian McCaffrey in 2025? This is probably assuming, I'm not going to put the caveats of where they're going because these are all pretty close, but this is probably an early second round pick that you're putting into one of these 2 players. Which one are you going with?
I'm going with Christian McCaffrey. I don't have the biasy or recency bias because I didn't draft him last year, so I don't feel bad about, okay, well, now I'll draft him this year because now he's discounted, because the upside case for him is he scores more points when he's healthy than any other player on the field. Shooting for that maximum upside, I think, is what we see when Christian McCaffrey is healthy. And I think Rich laid out a great point with the 49ers overall. You want to buy this offense. You want to buy all the discounted pieces after they all got hurt last year. Their defense, I think, has major question marks. He laid out the schedule. I think they're slated to just throw a ton of touchdowns, both rushing, receiving. McCaffrey's going to play a big role in that. So for me, I think it's going to be McCaffrey. And then on the Bucky side, again, we have another new offensive coordinator, right? What does the split work like with Rachaad White? I have less question marks about McCaffrey's healthy. He's in my lineup. That's all it takes. That's the only question mark that I have to answer. So he's the pick for me.
Yeah, all right. The thing with Bucky too is, and this might not happen to Bucky, but the year 2 running back that has been elevated to the second round, fringe wide receiver or fringe running back 1 has been an archetype of player that has burned us pretty repeatedly in fantasy football. I don't want to see it. Bucky Irving was so good last year, but all these other guys were too. You go down the list. These guys that weren't drafted with high draft capital had a small sample of really hyper efficiency. Andre Ellington, Miles Sanders, Jeremy Hill, Jeremy Langford, Thomas Rawls, James Robinson. These guys were all pushed in that year 2 up into that bucket, and we got torched on those guys.
All right, now I'm going to do this one more time. One little side one. Let me throw this, especially when we have, you guys both agree, because I have to be the deciding factor if we have disagreement, which God knows we'll have any disagreement here. But when we get the other guy and you guys both moved quick to Christian McCaffrey, let me just throw this at you. Has anything changed? Erickson, let's start with you. Again, you don't have to get into big breakdowns, just a quick one. Let's now go Bucky Irving versus Chase Brown. do we have a change?
I will take Bucky Irving there.
Okay. So I just know you're a Chase guy. I didn't know if that would push it. And we're agreeing, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, they're having literally back to back. So, but Bucky Irving was just a little bit better of a player than Chase Brown was last year. Chase Brown was all volume.
That's true. All right, let's move into like a RB2 range here for our third of the running backs. And this is going to be a nice rookie versus vet situation. We actually have some later that are specific. This one would have probably followed into it, but these are both RB2s. In fact, this is RB20 and RB21 on ECR. So right next to each other. We've mentioned one of these guys already, RB20, David Montgomery. Touchdown equity offense, you love it, but we also mentioned Jahmyr Gibbs, who's that first-round pick. We are going to pair him against Omarion Hampton with the Chargers. Chargers bring in Najee Harris, maybe questions. A lot of people tell you don't worry about any of the RBs that come in, these veteran RBs that come in to affect any of these rookies. These guys are next to each other. Should it be that way? Who would you rather, Rich? Omarion Hampton or David Montgomery?
This one is really rough because I would rather have James Conner than both these guys, and he's drafted after them. But I mean, it's kind of a case of two different things, right? Like you're looking at David Montgomery, and you're getting like that touchdown based floor. We haven't really seen him play a lot of games without Jahmyr Gibbs. There was a 2-game sample, Gibbs's rookie year, and then Montgomery got banged up in the second game of that. So we haven't really seen like him have like that Gibbsian, like could be LaDainian Tomlinson, like Erickson said earlier, like that doesn't really exist in the range of outcomes for Montgomery. He gets a spike, but he hasn't turned into like this world-beating entity. Omarion Hampton has to deal with Najee Harris, and I get like Najee Harris, like on paper, you guys are like, this dude's not that much of a threat. Najee Harris, I promise you, is a dude that like coaches love. Like this is like the type of running back that coaches love because he doesn't do anything bad. He doesn't do anything great, but he doesn't like lose you games either. And like coaches love that type of stuff. And I promise you that Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh are gonna love a dude like that. It's why they went out and got him. So it's a really tough kind of call here to say like, is Hampton going to be a guy that's in a timeshare the whole way as a rookie, or does the draft capital say like, hey, there's a runway for him to just take over Najee Harris, who's only on a 1-year contract, and then you're getting this back half of the year RB1. That range of outcomes, I think, will lead me to swing on Hampton more. But these are two guys that I don't really draft very often because, again, I have a running back that's below them that it wasn't part of the equation.
Erickson, you got a chance. Is this going to be a clean sweep of agreement across the board, or are you going to push against Omarion Hampton versus David Montgomery? Who would you rather in 2025, my friend?
Well, I agree with, so I can take James Conner over both.
You
these
cannot
guys.
take James Conner. Get James Conner out of here.
I also have it ranked the exact same way where Conner is above both of these players. I think for me, it's the rookie. I want to take as many, when in doubt, take a shot on one of these rookie running backs. We know this class is absolutely stacked, and maybe the planets don't align in week 1 or week 2 for Omarion Hampton, but who's to say it's going to be the perfect run out for David Montgomery? I mean, it's been the perfect run out for David Montgomery the last 2 seasons, where he's just been a touchdown machine. If the Lions regressing on offense hurts anybody the most, I think it would probably be Montgomery, because if they go from a top 3 scoring team to then they're now 10th in terms of total points scored, well, who's that going to hurt? Probably the guy that's the most touchdown dependent of the main playmakers, which is a David Montgomery. We know that Gibbs is really the primary pass catcher. We know that Gibbs is the one that's used and can make play. He can create his own red zone opportunities essentially because of how explosive he is. David Montgomery doesn't necessarily offer that. So if the Lions are playing from behind, is Montgomery in the game? We don't know. So I think for me, I'd rather take the swing on Omarion Hampton. And Welsh, I'm always thinking about projecting ahead to the season when you have these guys on your roster. In redraft, you're thinking about trades. Who's going to have more trade value? Just every single week, people are going to be trying to get Hampton from you because if he starts out slow. Whereas David Montgomery, I don't necessarily see where he's going to gain value as the season progresses. Hampton could do nothing for the first month, and his value could still hold because we know in the end, rookies usually win out. So I think for all looking at it from all different facets, I think that Hampton is just the better pick. And really, it's unless you really need frontline production, I guess Montgomery would be the pick. But at the same time, that's why James Conner is a great pick here, because he's the guy that can deliver a ton of frontline production before he suffers an injury.
Though I would say, like, similar to what you said before with Gibbs, if Gibbs were to miss time, Montgomery's a monster, like, because he is the guy. So in the same vein of giving the little extra credit to Gibbs, like Montgomery would deserve that. But if you're keeping stats here, that of the running backs, that's 2 of the 3 favorites in ECR that were in agreement. This is the first one where you guys are taking the ECR lower players. So we've got Omarion Hampton over Montgomery. That is the first lower ECR guy over. The other 2 are there. You guys listening and watching, comment below, and you can tell us who would you rather. When you do so, it might even get you some free stuff on those RBs. Giving away a wide receiver giveaway, because this month you got a chance to win a signed George Pickens Steelers jersey. It's a going out of business sale with the Cowboys now, but you can get that Steelers George Pickens jersey for free, courtesy of our friends over at pristineauction.com. All you've got to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now. Super easy. Drop a comment below on any video, and that's it. And I guys just gave you guys the suggestion. You guys go and put in who you like in those RB debates, and bam, you guys are in. We'll be announcing a winner right here on the channel, so make sure to turn on notifications so you can check out the new videos and you can potentially claim your prize of the George Pickens autograph jersey. Gentlemen, let's move to the wide receivers. We've got it's kind of similar. It's like a very top-end wide receiver debate. We've got that wide receiver round 2-ish debate, and then we're going a little bit deeper. So let's start at the top end. I think we've even had this conversation before. Wide receiver 8 versus wide receiver 7, Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr. I think I even saw a report today. Brian Thomas landed wrong in a practice or whatever. We're in that range where any of these practices, one little thing could happen. There was a quarterback we might have discussed that we didn't because we got new news, but this one is Brian Thomas, Nico Collins. They're next to each other in ECR. So Rich, take it away. Which wide receiver would you rather have?
It's still the chalk. The player ahead here, Nico Collins. I mean, Nico Collins was going to contend to be the wide receiver 1 last year for a stretch of the season. Then he picked up that hamstring injury, literally on a 65-yard touchdown that he caught, popped the wheel. And then after week 11, just wasn't the same player when he came back from injury. However, he still was 3rd among all receivers in yards per out run. If you take the top 10 yards per out run seasons of the past 2 years, there's only 2 players that appear on the list from both seasons. And it's Puka Nacua and Nico Collins. In the games he played, he had 40% of the team targets in the red zone, 58% of the end zone targets, the money looks. Both those are top 5 rates. I still just have a little more confidence in his offensive infrastructure. And remember, the Texans hired a guy from the McVay tree, Nick Caley, to be the offensive coordinator. What if Nico Collins starts to get some of that free square stuff that we've seen wide receiver 1s in that offensive system get to as well? I have no problem with Brian Thomas Jr., and I would love to have Brian Thomas Jr. in a bunch of fantasy teams this year. But if you're making me choose, I'm choosing Nico Collins.
Well, I may have also said it weird, by the way, because Nico is a spot below Brian Thomas.
Is he? I assumed he was the ahead of him.
No, Brian Thomas is number 7 on ECR. Nico Collins is number 8. Andrew Erickson. Could this be the first disagreement between both of you very smart gentlemen?
No, it won't be. And that definitely sounds weird for me because I was really the Brian Thomas Jr. guy last year. I mean, I had to lead all rookies in receiving yards, the 18-1 bet. We hit that last year with Brian Thomas Jr. So it feels weird to be going against him here. But Nico Collins is just so clearly the alpha wide receiver in this Texans offense. And when he's been healthy the last 2 years, he's top 5 in the NFL in receiving yards per game. Receiving yards per game. Again, we have so many of these advanced metrics when it comes to projecting fantasy points. At the simplest numbers, it's just how many yards does this guy get? That's the best predictor of future fantasy production. And Nico Collins checks off all the boxes. So you look at his target competition compared to last year. Last year, it was an ascending Tank Dell and an established Stephon Diggs. Now it's Christian Kirk on his 3rd team, and he can never stay healthy in the second half of seasons, and 2 rookie wide receivers that they drafted. He's just so slated. If this Texans offense just gets back to where they were with CJ Stroud as a rookie, Nico Collins has been going back to 1,500 receiving yards, 15-plus receiving touchdowns. And as much as I love Brian Thomas Jr., there's just more question marks about what his role will look like. Not to say that he's not going to be heavily involved, but it's still a new offense. He didn't break out last year with Trevor Lawrence. It was a different quarterback last year. And now you add a really talented player in Travis Hunter into the equation who really wasn't a factor. There really wasn't another number 2 with Brian Thomas Jr. last year. And we've seen with Brian Thomas Jr. where he really opens things up for other receivers to potentially eat, just like at LSU. Malik Neighbors was the guy that was getting all the receptions, whereas he was ripping off all the big plays. So it's enough. I can see enough where I give the slight edge to Nico, but I have them ranked back to back. And again, I would love both of them on my team, but
yeah, and I'm looking here too. If you go on to Fantasy Pros on the ranks, fantasypros.com/rankings, you can also click into the player and you can also see like the best and the worst individual ranks, and you can see all the rankers. So when you're looking at both of these guys, Brian Thomas does not have a rank above 3. So there's only actually 2 people that have Brian Thomas as wide receiver number 3 this season, and then it keeps going down. By the way, one of them, Derek Brown, Debro, our boy, not here. He has him as the wide receiver 3. Nico Collins has 2 people ranking him as the number 2 overall wide receiver, and then a handful that have him at 3, including Andrew Erickson, who has him at 3. So just an interesting thing that you've got a high-end sentiment on Nico Collins over Brian Thomas right now in the ranks, yet Brian Thomas is ranked higher, which is, so it ends up like leveling itself out, and Brian Thomas ends up being the top guy here, but you guys are both going with one below. So Nico Collins wins that. Who would you rather? Next up, I personally really like this one. At this rate, you guys might just continuously agree, and maybe it won't be as good, but I thought this was a fun one. Drake London, who is wide receiver 10 on half point ECR here, versus Lad McConkey. And I understand maybe full point might change this a little bit, but Lad was a monster. He is wide receiver 12. These are both wide receiver 1s in the top 12 range. So Rich, Drake London, Lad McConkey, who do you want?
This was the first one I actually don't have particularly close in like my own individual stuff. I mean, I am a volume forward player. I mean, Drake London had 45 more targets than Lad McConkey last year. And I think some people are taking away some of the back half signal from the Chargers in the wrong direction. Because, the Chargers, the front half of the year, they weren't very pass heavy. They were giving us that hardball Roman offense, but their running backs were terrible. They couldn't run the ball at all, and they started to throw more. And there's a clear line where Lad McConkey and Justin Herbert started to take off for fantasy. And I would love for that to be something that we can count on just being static. But when you look at every move that the Chargers made in conjunction with the way their season ended, remember the Chargers season ended with their quarterback throwing 4 interceptions and their running backs averaging under 3 yards per carry. That's not the way Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman want to play football. And this season, what do they do when offseason opens? They sign Mekhi Becton, a run grading guard. They get Najee Harrison, and they use a first-round pick in Omarion Hampton. Like, they still scream to me like they haven't shedded their skin. Like, this is still a team that has potential volume issues from a passing stance. Whereas the Atlanta Falcons, I know they're going to be pressed, and they're going to be pressed to throw the football. And you look at especially like the Falcons schedule, like they open with teams like they have to score points. They open against the Bucks, the Vikings, the Panthers, who usually say the Panthers, but they just last time we saw these teams play, they played a 60-point bonanza. The Commanders, the Bills, the 49ers, the Dolphins, the Patriots who could be sneaky upside. They get the Bucks, the Cardinals, and the Rams in the fantasy playoffs. Like the Falcons are going to have to score points. Their defense might not be good. And Drake London, I think, as like Loki, and I know I'm saying this in the Fantasy Pros podcast, and D-Bro's not here. Like, I think he's drawing live to be the PPR wide receiver 1 this season. Drake London is. I mean, we saw him get the Zach Robinson bump in terms of slot usage that got him free squares. And then when Michael Penix took over, he started to blend those short targets with targets that come with upside. His 8-out went up. Michael Penix pushed the ball outside the numbers and down the field. He was an absolute unit when Michael Penix took over. It was only a 3-game sample. But then, top down, no matter who the quarterback was, Drake London had 60% of the team's end zone targets. Like, this guy, like Zach Robinson knew the assignment to get Drake London the football. I don't think this one is particularly close. I love Lad McConkey, the player. I think he's going to have a tremendous career. In Dynasty, I love Lad McConkey. I think Drake London torches him in fantasy football this year.
So this one is actually going to be fun in a completely different way here. So, first off, I already know Erickson's answer. The reason I know Erickson's answer is because he is the highest individual ranker on all of Fantasy Pros on one of these wide receivers. So I already know what it is. I'm going to give you another little, I'm tipping my hand here also. Weird thing, Lad McConkey's actually moved up since I put this together yesterday. He is now wide receiver 11, I just noticed. So these guys are same tier on ECR. They are next to each other. Rich says, this ain't close. Erickson, you're going to agree.
I don't think it's close either. I think it's clearly Drake London, and I'm glad that Rich called him a unit because that's exactly what he is. And I'm co-signing the live for wide receiver 1 overall finish. And I don't really know if I have anything else to add, because you hit on all the points that I was going to bring to the table. The only thing I would add, again, going into the high value opportunities that Drake London has seen through 3 years, he leads the NFL at wide receiver in terms of red zone target rate. Whenever he's in the red zone, he's been peppered with targets. And the last 6 wide receiver 1 overall finishers all led the NFL in red zone targets per game. And last year he was, I believe, inside the top 5 in terms of total red zone targets, and that's been with multiple quarterbacks. So I love Drake London this year. I think that he is just an auto pick in the second round, and I wouldn't even dissuade someone from taking him at the end of round 1.
I would love to know.
Michael Penix threw 9 passes into the end zone last year, and 6 of them were to Drake London.
I mean, if he gets plenty of those opportunities, London's going to thrive. Ifs and buts were candy and nuts, though, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. And that's always a Falcons conversation we could have. But I would love to know in the comments, do you guys agree that this one is so wildly off base, that it is so in favor of Drake London? Because, this also might be telling us.
Drafters say no.
Rankers are saying no, this is very close. Not only same tier, but they are next to each other. But the other thing that would be really interesting about this at the end of the day is does anybody think there's a chance that Ladd could be higher than Drake London? And is this a maybe future forecast? If you guys come back on Fantasy Pros in a month or two in heavy draft season, is Drake London going to be a lot higher? Is this only a few people that are locking in as ranks continue to come in and people do more research? Could we see Drake London pushing guys like AJ Brown, who's a tier higher, Nico Collins and Brian Thomas, who we just talked about? Interesting conversation, but do you guys agree that it is this far apart? All right, last one on the wide receivers. We're moving down a little bit. We are floating somewhere between the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range. And this one's kind of a mixed bag. I think this actually might be the biggest rank differentials between any guys we're going to talk about. And that might create you guys both being like, oh, it's clearly the high guy. But part of this is about Xavier Worthy, who is wide receiver 27 on ECR, who I think Erickson, we've done shows where we've talked about hey, Rashee Rice is fun, but at the end of the day, Xavier Worthy is going to be the guy. He proved himself to be the guy, except we jokingly talk about Xavier Worthy and we say, well, he was in the Rashee Rice role. Well, Rashee Rice is back and potentially could take his role back, but he is lower than DJ Moore, who comes in at ECR 20. So this is a big difference. But we put this together as well because you've got Burden who's coming in. You've got everybody assuming Adunze is going to take over. And if we have Caleb Williams being a whole lot better, what really, how big of a big boost and positive is that for DJ Moore? So all of that little conjecture in the front here. Rich, is this another big gap between these two guys? What do you say? DJ Moore is ECR 20, Xavier Worthy is 27. Does it deserve to be that big of a gap? And are you going to pick DJ Moore?
These are two guys that I just haven't been drafting, which makes this kind of fun because it made me kind of just analyze the two. I still believe if you're just betting, I believe DJ Moore is a significantly better wide receiver than Xavier Worthy, though. So if that would be where I would start the conversation with, is that we've seen DJ Moore win on all 3 levels, whereas we've not seen that from Xavier Worthy at all. We saw Xavier Worthy make that push towards the end of last season, but a lot of that was a lot of stuff created, manufactured near the line of scrimmage. He wasn't winning with nuance. I mean, if you guys follow Matt Harmon's work at Reception Perception, Xavier Worthy is a player that just didn't grade out very well, especially against man coverage and press man. We just really haven't seen him be a great wide receiver yet. And it could happen. He's a young player. He's only maybe a year or 2 player building off a strong second half. But now we have to go into the season with kind of a question mark, where all these Chiefs wide receivers fit together now. Because Rashee Rice is also a player that doesn't win with a lot of nuance. A lot of things have been his sample one near the line of scrimmage, right? You get Hollywood Brown. Because remember last year, we didn't get to see any of the way the Chiefs wanted to operate their passing game at all. I mean, Hollywood Brown got injured in the preseason, misses 14 games. Rashee Rice opens the season. He's hurt in week 4, and they have to default run the offense back through a 35-year-old Travis Kelce, which clearly wasn't the plan if you watch the opening month of the season. And the Chiefs' kind of offense just was never good, from a passing stance, and it injured Mahomes too. I think that's what makes Mahomes interesting too, is kind of having this all back and reset at the blocks of hey, we're going to have the 3 receivers back, and then hopefully Kelce's a complementary piece versus, having to run this offense with now 36-year-old Travis Kelce, who's coming off of the worst efficiency of his career. So it makes it interesting. But DJ Moore, I think, is just a bet on the better football player if you're making me pick. Getting involved with Ben Johnson, getting him removed from the Shane Waldron, Thomas Brown offense that was a year ago, he was just a nightmare. If you saw any interviews with him, he talked about his usage was absolutely awful. Getting the ball just at the line of scrimmage, which he hated, not getting used creatively. If you watch his body language during the season last year, he looked completely checked out. And it's because the offense was a travesty. You still have to hope that Caleb Williams can course correct some of the mistakes that he had as a rookie. Things that quarterbacks typically, whether the coordinator is good or not, don't really correct. This offense just was so bad last year. It's hard to take a lot away from what the Bears did and say hey, any of it could be static. It's just guess game. I'd rather have guys like Devontae Smith and probably Cortland Sutton even in this range. But if you're making me pick, I would choose the guy who I believe is just a better football player.
So Erickson, I'm obviously same question. Who would you rather? But I'm going to throw in a little caveat. I'd love to get if it sways your answer at all. You can still give your normal answer, but then does this play into it? Does an extra round of value matter to you here? Because we're probably looking at DJ Moore based on the overall ranks here. You're looking at him as roughly a 4th round player, but you're looking at Xavier Worthy somewhere between 5 and 6. So straight line answer, Worthy versus DJ Moore. This is the difference between wide receiver 2 and 3, but also round would be the secondary thing. I'd be curious if it matters at all from a talent perspective, if they're close.
I don't think it would move the needle for me that much, just getting Worthy, a round later than DJ Moore. It's still that middle round range where I think that you're still trying to make bets on potential breakout wide receivers. And to Rich's point, I haven't really been drafting DJ Moore a lot either for some of the reasons he laid out. Just the vibes in general with him and Ben Johnson, it doesn't seem like, oh yeah, this is going to work out great. This is going to be a fantastic pairing. I would rather wait and draft Odunze. Again, the value game. If I'm going to bet on this Bears offense, just give me Odunze. Second-year guy, breakout candidate. And that's kind of how I see Worthy, where, yes, a lot of receivers break out as rookies, but then a lot of them break out in year 2. And the way that they have talked about Xavier Worthy, it's exactly like they talked about Rashee Rice. And they talked about, hey, his rookie year, the first half of the season was okay, kind of up and down. Then he really hit his stride in the second half of that rookie year. That's exactly what Xavier Worthy did last year. At the second half of his rookie season, it was getting bad to start the season. It was this guy's going to be a bust. What's going to happen with Xavier Worthy? But then he turned it on. I get that the Super Bowl numbers are very not realistic, but I think that the Chiefs, they keep talking about, we want to bring back the deep ball. I don't know. I just think that Xavier Worthy, again, a prospect I really liked, he showed out in the second half of the season. And when I look at some of the second-year receivers under Andy Reid that fit this speed type of player that Xavier Worthy can be, that I think that he maybe hasn't unlocked yet, Deshaun Jackson, Tyreek Hill, just for some examples. Those guys both blew up in year 2 with Andy Reid as the head coach. So if Rashee Rice is limited or just not back to his 100% coming off of this season-ending injury, maybe he takes a little bit longer to get going, I think that this team can really use, I think we could see Worthy and Rice both hit if Travis Kelce is the one that ends up taking a big step back. So I'm definitely more open to Worthy than DJ Moore.
Oh, so you're going Worthy. You pulled a rug here.
There
I
we
thought
go.
this was going to be DJ Moore. We got some dissent here. Okay, so you went Worthy. I that's where you were leaning, but the very first response, thought you were like, oh, no, poo-pooed this. It's DJ Moore, da-da-da. Love the breakdown. Love that. Ugh. So I have to be the one to break the tie here then. I think I'm going to go with Worthy, and I think I might throw in a little bit, and this is cheating a tiny bit, but that value that you're going to get, you're getting him around to a round and a half, maybe even 2 behind DJ Moore. Worried what Burton takes, Loveland takes, what ends up being of that offense completely and how DJ Moore really thrives in it, where I think Worthy's a really explosive player. I think they really, at the end of the day, they might not be this big of a difference on ECR. So if I'm the tiebreaker here, I'm actually going to go on the lower side with Xavier Worthy, which great to see, Erickson. I love that you picked that. So if you're doing some stats here, again, in the wide receiver range, we actually had 2 non-favorites win. So we went 2-1 on the lower ranked player going up. We now have 3 total in the Who Would You Rathers that are going lower on the ECR that you guys have both picked, or, have at least one at the end of the day. We're going to go and talk about some quarterbacks and tight ends. But first, the NBA Finals are here, and this is your last shot to win some real cash before the season ends. The simplest way to get in on the action? Downloading the Pick 6 app from DraftKings. It's crazy simple. You just pick more or less on the stats of 2 or more of your favorite players, and boom, you're in the mix for big cash prizes. No gimmicks, no weird rules, just ball, man. Nail your picks, and you're heating up. Pick 6 brings upside with payouts up to 500 times. If you're ready to make your finals run, you got to get with Pick 6 now, and they're live in a ton of states like Texas, California, Georgia, Missouri, and a lot more. And get this, all new Pick 6 customers instantly will get $50 in bonus picks on just a $5 entry. So don't miss your last shot to win some cash this NBA season by downloading the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code FANTASYPROS. That's code FANTASYPROS. New customers play $5, get $50 in bonus picks instantly. Ride the upside only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gentlemen, let's go to some quarterbacks. We are going to play a quarterback one game, and then we're going to play kind of like a super flex. So the secondary one is going to be more of a super flex option, deeper quarterbacks versus if you're in that super flex range, who would you rather? But let's start with not super high end. We're not touching the top 5 quarterbacks. I played around with a couple different scenarios, by the way, as I was like staring at it. A couple different guys I kind of wanted to touch on. If I'm being specific, there was like a Jalen Hurts versus Joe Burrow one that was kind of floating out, but you got a lot more higher ranks, and they have a differential of a tier here. But we're going to jump to tier 3 in the QBs, and these guys are next to each other. This is QB 8 and QB 9. Bo Nix at QB 8 versus Kyler Murray, QB 9. A lot of running upside here. So probably at the end of the day, the factor between the two might be what you think you can get out of the passing game because they're both going to run. But Rich, you get to make that decision. Who would you rather at quarterback this year? You're kind of late round quarterbacking it, Bo Nix or Kyler Murray?
I think neither. I think when you look at your guys' ADP, even at Fantasy Pros, both these guys at cost are definitely not worth the squeeze, especially compared to the running backs and wide receivers. I mean, even I have my QB8 in the 90s. That's like where they should be going.
Well, and you look at the quarterbacks lower. I agree, by the way, because those like QB 11, 12, it's ridiculously good value.
In particular, I don't think there's a huge gap this year between like QB8 and like QB17 either. This is like a very flat year at QB for non-elites as well. I think I look to the downside of both these QBs of paying the iron price for both of them. Well, one, Kyler Murray has like never made that jump, right? Of like from like just being like this guy that can give you a floor with some rushing to be like this full on what we now call the Konami guys, like the dual threat guys, because he just hasn't been a good passer over his career. And I do think some of the infusion of like the increased too high stuff and making quarterbacks throw over the middle of the field has hurt a guy like Kyler, who he's not the biggest dude, man. Like there's a reason he doesn't throw over the middle of the field, and why Marv didn't have all of those like in-breaking stuff. Because again, like to quote Matt Harmon again, the reception, like Marv was winning on those in-breaking routes. He just wasn't getting targeted on those routes because Kyler either wasn't seeing him or wasn't making the correct reads on those routes. I mean, he literally hasn't had a 4% touchdown rate in the past 4 years. Like, so you need like that marriage of the passing upside. I think he's had a solid floor, but he hasn't been able to make that jump. So I don't want to pay the iron price for him. And then Bo Nix his ADP is completely baffling to me. Like this guy looks like Denver Tua, like when we elevated Tua. Everything was manufactured for him as a rookie, and that's fine when you get him at QB 20, like where he was going last year, and you can smash. But like now you're paying for him as a top 10 quarterback. He had 2 games before week 18 where he even finished higher than QB 8, and they were completely identifiable spots. He had 8 games before week 18 where he faced a pass defense in the front half of the league, and his average scoring week those weeks was QB 18 with a high scoring week of QB 10. Now Denver, because they were good and made the jump last year, they have a 26th ranked passing schedule. They have a ludicrously more hard passing schedule. We didn't see him punch up as a rookie as good as it was. Sean Payton basically said, like, I'm going to make you a proxy of what Mike McDaniel did with Tua and Drew Brees, because the pressure stuff with Bo Nix is completely manufactured. He was awful under pressure as a rookie, and what Sean Payton did was like, hey, you know how you won't be under pressure? We'll just have you throw the ball at the line of scrimmage. 29% of his throws were at or behind the line of scrimmage. Only Patrick Mahomes and Tua Tagovailoa had higher rates. He had 7 passing touchdowns on throws that didn't even go past the line of scrimmage last year. Number 1 in the NFL When he held the ball longer than 2.5 seconds, he completely dipped. He went to 21st in quarterback rating. He threw 11 interceptions to 14 touchdowns, went to 20th league in touchdown rate. I get, like, you can say, like, there's some floor here, but I don't want to take a quarterback as a floor play in this range. Like, I'd rather just wait and take, like, a Drake May and say, like, hey, he could be what Bo Nix was last year as a floor play and maybe offer more upside. Maybe a JJ McCarthy or a guy like that. I can't get on board with Bo Nix's ADP. I just can't.
Okay, so Kyler Murray is the answer for you there. You're locking in Kyler Murray.
The answer, you should be taking
I get neither.
Pickens or someone else in this range.
Well, I'm going to blow your mind, by the way.
Well, he's making the point that this is where the value really does matter significantly.
Yes.
And that taking the middle range of quarterbacks,
yes,
they're more likely to finish near the guys behind them than the guys in front of them.
Correct.
Completely agree. But that's why we have the debate. But I'm going to blow your mind here. 4 rankers have him as a top 6 quarterback.
That's bananas. That's absolutely bananas.
One of them is an analyst you've mentioned a couple times here. The reception is very high for this ranker for this quarterback. So we'll now go to you, Mr. Andrew Erickson.
We saw them play in the playoffs. The offense died. Like,
I'm not taking Bo Nix as a top 10 quarterback. Yell at me. These are your peers that are doing this, by the way.
Yeah,
the ECR is based on these rankers. I agree. Kyler Murray and Bo Nix, that makes my stomach turn. Erickson, what's going on with your stomach with these two guys? Can you I mean, you got to pick one. That's why we're doing this. I think everything else feels really good. I think we all relatively agree. It's like, you want to go elite? Here's your little grouping of elite. You don't go elite, live in the later territory, because it's like, what's the line truly between like Brock Purdy at like QB 12 or 13 or whatever and Bo Nix? You want value at the end of the day. So also don't get stuck on like the overall value, but it is still very alarming when you see like Murray and Nix up there. So you got to pick one clearly. And which one are you going to do?
If I have to pick one, I would pick Kyler. I think that we've
Over
seen
Bo.
it from
Bo
him.
is a higher one.
I've seen Kyler. Again, we've seen Kyler do it, and again, he hasn't really completely taken that next step. But I would say that he kind of feels like he's on the hot seat a little bit, where he needs to prove to this coaching staff that, hey, like, I am like the franchise quarterback. I know they already paid him, but it's still, we're wanting more with him. And he even came out and said this offseason, like, I'm going to run more. So whether he does it or not remains to be seen. His production always falls off when Call of Duty comes out. So that's always something you have to keep in mind. Because it's interesting, when I looked back at both of these quarterbacks, they had kind of similar seasons when it comes to their rushing. I think that they're both viewed as rushing quarterbacks, but when you go to putting these guys in your lineup week in and week out, it was really hard to project the games in which they would actually decide to run. And a lot of times it was based on game flow. If the Broncos were playing a more difficult team, like Hribar said, Bo Nix would run more, but his passing numbers would dip. But then when they were playing a bad team, they would just beat up on that team and Bo Nix would have better passing numbers. So I think that to Rich's point, both of these guys are being propped up probably incorrectly. I would say that I get a little bit more optimistic about Kyler. Marvin taking a step in year 2. He has Trey McBride. I think that just in this offense, I think I could see more from Kyler. I think he could put more on his shoulders, where I don't think Sean Payton necessarily wants to do it, making that comparison to Tua, where we're not trying to overload our second-year quarterback to have him do everything. Like, let's make it easy for him. And when we're beating up on a bad team, we can run the ball effectively. We have a really good defense. Like, let's do that. Whereas Arizona, they play in a dome. They're playing the NFC West, where you could see a lot of games where it's high-paced shootouts. I just see the environment and season-long upside a little bit more. I can see that picture with Kyler Murray versus a Bo Nix, who, again, a lot of his biggest numbers and stats came against really bad teams. He really beat up on these bad teams. Week 18 against Chiefs backups. That the infamous Carolina Panthers game where I remember we were talking about it on the weekly rankings. We're like, Bo Nix, top 6 quarterback. Are we really doing it this week?
Great
and
DFS. He won us DFS money those weeks. I'm grateful.
But it was a lot of the matchups that were driven. But I know I have a couple things like to point out with Nix. Again, when it comes to the inconsistencies, when he would run and when he wouldn't run, he had a 31% bust rate last year when it came to how often he would finish inside the top 12 versus outside the top 24. 31%, that was the highest among any quarterback that finished top 10 overall in terms of total points scored. When it comes to his passer rating from a clean pocket, it was 24th. When it came to intermediate passing, so passing at the intermediate level from 10 to 19 yards downfield, ranked 40th out of 43 qualifying quarterbacks per PFF. So there's just enough holes, I think, in expecting him to just take this massive leap going into year 2. And this is something I've kind of talked about with Actually, I met with Justin, one of our developers in Boston, a couple of days ago. He's a Bears fan, and obviously he's always very making the comparisons to Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix to guys like Drake May and Caleb Williams. I think we have to remember that Caleb Williams and Drake May are significantly younger than Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels. They didn't play nearly as many games at the college level as those guys. So I don't think that we can just project, okay, Bo Nix is just take this monster sophomore leap when his rookie situation was really, really good. And maybe, I know at least I undervalued his rookie evaluation where he was with Sean Payton, how good a fit that was. But I'm not trying to overvalue and double count that into year two, where he's going to take this another massive leap, where I expect guys like Caleb and Drake May to take these massive leaps. And would anybody be surprised if Caleb Williams and Drake May outscore Bo Nix now that they're both in much better situations, whereas he's in the same situation it was last year? Again, it was good, but maybe we could see more growth from guys like Drake May and Caleb Williams. So my long-winded answer of saying I'm going to go with Kyler Murray.
You know what? I'm even more happy we talked about this. Probably the only time we're going to talk about these two guys this entire season, because they are that range that we don't want to draft. So you guys did a great job there. But again, a quarterback that is lower in ECR that you guys both picked. All right, one more quarterback. We're living in the super flex range now. So just the only reason I'm saying this is, put your super flex hat on. This is like a QB2 when you're picking between these guys. Young quarterbacks, Michael Penix, who is the lower of the ranked players, QB 24 on ECR versus JJ McCarthy at QB 22. This should be some fun. Maybe not exactly the superflex type of quarterback you would want, but they technically are ranked in the top 24. Maybe you do. Rich, Michael Penix or JJ McCarthy, who would you rather?
Listen, I know I was against Debro on Bo Nix, but I think I'm going to be on lockstep with him with JJ McCarthy here. It's really just, splitting kind of the area where these guys go is just having a lot more faith in, Kevin O'Connell and the top down offensive environment. Not that I think that the Falcons are necessarily going to be like a bad offense, but, we saw Michael Penix even in that run, QB 30, QB 25, QB 7 in his three starts as a rookie. He could get pushed. I think Michael Penix has some fun Jameis Winston to him as well. Like there could be where you just get so much volume, it might not matter. But I think JJ McCarthy, the infrastructure of the Minnesota Vikings could really lead to him having a Brock Purdy-ish type, like the gap between him and Brock Purdy it could look a lot wider than what it is. Because I think that they're both going to probably have similar passing volume, and then McCarthy could have he could be a hyper efficient passer, because everything the Vikings have done this offseason has signaled that they want to run the football more, not only to insulate JJ McCarthy, but get a lot of those high efficiency, play action targets with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and, TJ Hawkinson, off of that play action game. I mean, you look at what they've done this offseason. I mean, the first thing they do is extend Aaron Jones. They sign Will Fries and Ryan Kelly. They trade for Jordan Mason. They draft Donovan Jackson in the first round. Yesterday, they just extended Josh Oliver, the best run blocking tight end in the NFL. So if JJ McCarthy just has a reduction of the negative plays that Sam Darnold had, because Darnold was, for as much as jump he made, he was a very boom or bust quarterback. I mean, he was third in the NFL in plays that generated one whole EPA or more per play, but he was also 25th in plays that were negative -1 EPA or worse. He was 28th in sack rate. He was 19th in interception rate. He was 32nd turnover worthy throw rate. If JJ McCarthy just cleans that up as an improvement, the upside for this offense actually is even higher, considering, which seems wild to think because they were such an overachieving team last year. The Minnesota Vikings have a top-down really good football team. It's just me betting on the infrastructure. I think they offer more efficiency-based stuff. But if you are just saying hey, Penix could run into 600 pass attempts, I don't have a lot of pushback on that either.
Erickson, would you say that Michael Penix versus JJ McCarthy, who would you rather?
I'm going to go with McCarthy as well. I think that's my pick. I think just the infrastructure we've seen with this Vikings offense just be so great for fantasy. I know that we talked about earlier, Drake London, dark horse, wide receiver 1 overall. Well, Justin Jefferson's not a dark horse to be wide receiver 1. He's in the conversation. I mean, he's ranked as a top 3 receiver for a reason. So if he ends up being, the wide receiver 1, chances are JJ McCarthy has a pretty good season. He's got, again, he has more weapons to just work with. The offensive line, I feel good about with Minnesota. So, and I don't want to be, again, Penix, the sample size from last year, he only played a couple games. So he's still, a first-time starter, really kind of taking everything under, similar to McCarthy. So I will go with the Vikings QB.
All right, we've got a tight end, and we're going to do a couple quick hitters on some rookies versus vets, but you guys can take a lot of these debates and who would you rather, where you can literally put it on the sheets with the Draft Simulator. You can level up your fantasy football draft prep by testing all this stuff out with Fantasy Pros Mock Draft Simulator. You can complete realistic mock drafts in minutes without waiting between picks. Tailor your mock drafts to your league-specific settings, including roster configurations and scoring systems. You can receive instant feedback and draft grades to refine your draft strategy and gain a competitive edge. You can try out all the different versions of what your teams can look like and prepare confidently. Dominate your draft with Mock Draft Simulator at fantasypros.com/mock. We're going to do one tight end one. It's going to be gross. We're in the mud a little bit. There could be a super easy answer, but if you're around for our Bold Predictions show, which you should check out on YouTube, and you heard Pat Fitzmaurice talk, Pat might not completely agree with this one. All right, prepare to feel yucky. Tight end 15 versus tight end 16. Tyler Warren, rookie, versus Kyle Pitts. And Tyler Warren is ranked higher on the ECR. Fool me once, right, Rich? What do you say?
Which one of these guys is younger? Is it Kyle Pitts? It's not, right?
No, I don't think so.
No, just barely.
I don't know, man. I think it's
pretty close. It's pretty close. But what say you, Rich? Kyle Pitts, you go down this route again, or is it rookie time?
There's no way you can get me to draft Kyle Pitts as long as he's on this. As long as he's on this team, because he's not a fit. Like the Zach Robinson doghoused him last year. I can't believe he hasn't been traded this offseason. And maybe it's just because he's on that fifth year option, and the Falcons wanted just a little bit more than what teams are willing to pry away from him. Because over the final 9 games last year, he had 183 yards receiving. Charlie Warner played more snaps than Kyle Pitts because he can run block. And what has the role in this offense always had? And all the throughout everyone that's run this scheme, you better be able to run block in this scheme. They asked Kyle Pitts to be that two-way player last year. He played 51% of his snaps in line last year. To open his career, it was 32%, 38%, 21%. He had a career low air yards per target as a default, and Kyle Pitts wasn't able to generate yardage after the catch with those targets near the line of scrimmage that he wasn't getting early in his career with Arthur Smith. He was 55th among all tight ends in yards after the catch on targets within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. He also just didn't get open. He was 41st out of 43 qualifying tight ends in ESPN's open score. He's just not a fit right now. Excuses have been made based on quarterback play right now, being lost in schemes. But right now, Kyle Pitts is the common denominator of Kyle Pitts' problems. And maybe that's just, him coming off of the knee injury. Maybe he'll never be that player. And in the multiverse somewhere else, there's a Kyle Pitts that was healthy, landed in a good offensive environment, and his career took off and is thriving. But as long as he's involved in this scheme, I don't see a lot of outs for him, paying off. Granted, the price is as cheap as it's ever been. If you wanted to say, hey, whatever, I'm throwing that at the wall. Like we say, he'll be 25 in October. We'll be doing this forever with Kyle Pitts. He's turning 25, 26, 27. But he's got to get on a new team, man. He's got to get on a new team.
If Kyle Pitts has a top 5 tight end season, it might cause an incursion, and we're going to just have all the different Kyle Pitts just battling it out in the battle world. All right, Erickson, Kyle Pitts or Tyler Warren?
I'll go Tyler Warren. I agree. Kyle Pitts needs a fresh start somewhere. I think that he's going to be great on the Commanders in 2028 when he puts up his second 1,000-yard campaign. It's going to be great.
I can't wait for the Chiefs to get him. He just replaces Kelsey.
This will be super awesome. All right, so let's jump. Let's do a couple quick hitters here. I've got some rookies versus vets. We've gone fantastic show, gone long, so I don't want to sit too high into these ones. But this is going to be pure rookie versus vet. Upside is going to obviously come into play. Let's start with the running back one here. RJ Harvey, who is RB27. There's been a lot of talk about the moves that that team has been making as well, versus DeAndre Swift, who is RB24. And just kind of always. Rich, rookie versus vet. You want RJ Harvey, who is 3 spots lower, or DeAndre Swift, 24 versus 27 in the ECR RBs?
I still lean Harvey and just betting on kind of how we did the same argument with Hampton versus Montgomery, right? You got kind of more of a boring player versus a guy that could just offer more upside, right? To break the tie. The signing of J.K. Dobbins, didn't necessarily move a ton. I think it has a lot more to say about Audric Estime than it necessarily does RJ Harvey in terms of, capital. And I never in projections had, RJ Harvey getting 300 touches either. So it wasn't a big deal. I still had them operating with in the capacity of some type of backfield split, even with guys like Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin. I think Dobbins takes away more from those guys than he necessarily does Harvey. Harvey also is in that archetype where he doesn't necessarily need 300 touches because he's such an explosive player. Giving him 200 to 225 touches could be significant. We've seen that archetype running back get a bigger fantasy boost in recent years, with the Devin H hands, and we talked about Jahmyr Gibbs earlier. So I still lean towards, RJ Harvey. DeAndre Swift is doing a little Neo in the Matrix this offseason now. Like, he's dodging all the bullets. Like, he's getting as pure a run out as you can hope for if you're in the DeAndre Swift camp.
Well, Erickson, Swift is 3 spots higher in ECR over Harvey. So shiny new toy, or I guess kind of what we've known before, Swift or Harvey?
I will take the shiny new toy with RJ Harvey as well. I talked about it on a show, I think last week, where I put DeAndre Swift as slightly overvalued. And I don't think that the upside case is there for him. Every year of his career, you look, the best finish he's been is basically that RB2. And I think Reeves has talked about it. RB2 production is the easiest to replace.
Yeah.
So I'll roll with Javonte Williams for a little bit, and he'll probably do 75% of what DeAndre Swift does in the Bears offense. But then if I draft Harvey, oh man, this guy could end up being, what if he is Kamara in Sean Payton's offense? Again, not saying that's going to necessarily happen, but putting it within the range of outcomes, I know that's not going to happen for DeAndre Swift most likely. So I will take the upside shot with RJ, knowing that I can backfill RB2 production in case, it starts out more as a committee. I can't rely on Harvey to open the year. We know J.K. Dobbins isn't made for the long term. We know that he's probably going to be most productive to start the year, but then Harvey's going to be the guy to lean on down the stretch.
There you go. There's some value there. Last one, wide receiver. I struggled on who to put Travis Hunter up against. Travis Hunter, ECR 35 at wide receiver. I'll just be frank about it. I told Rich about this. There was one point where I threw a Chris Godwin in there, who's ECR 29. There's an injury thing that's floating out there, but like Godwin is Godwin. And I switched it up to Deebo Samuel, who is lower than Travis Hunter, which I don't think really helps the argument. But you got some stuff going on with McLaurin. You obviously know the touchdown equity of Deebo Samuel. So I'm not trying to necessarily throw both out there, but Rich, if you want to answer it, Travis Hunter versus the higher Chris Godwin, the lower Deebo Samuel, who and does he beat either one of these guys?
Yeah, I would probably take a bet on Travis Hunter versus Deebo Samuel for sure. Maybe even Chris Godwin as we go into the hood here. But I think Deebo Samuel is a great real addition to the Washington Commanders. I don't necessarily think he's a great fantasy addition. I mean, I think that the target share is going to be largely flat. I don't think people realize that like Terry McLaurin didn't even have like an elite target share last year. Like he was in the low 20 to 23% range. Like he wasn't one of these guys pushing 25 to 30%. So the addition of Deebo Samuel is definitely pull a little bit on that, assuming they get this contractual, schism worked out over the summer. Most of these things usually do by the time we roll around to like August drafts. Deebo hasn't played he's played one full season of his career. It's just really hard to say like Deebo offers a lot of upside. He's got one season that had like a massive touchdown spike, and that was the year he was like fantasy relevant. So if you run hot with touchdowns, maybe you get there, but that we've seen that's an outlier year for Deebo Samuel. I do have some questions about Chris Godwin too, just with the Liam Cohen change, because paired with the injury, paired with the Emekbuka addition, do we see Chris Godwin have to play more outside? We saw him have last year just get peppered with screen targets, right? 5.7 air yards per target, the lowest rate of his career. He had a 1.6% target share on route throws 20 yards or further downfield, by far the lowest rate of his career, 16% screen rate. Well, guess who's got his offensive coordinator now? Travis Hunter. And Travis Hunter is a guy who already had some of that screen stuff built in at Colorado. He also won downfield as well. And also, I've my thing with Travis Hunter is I've just been not wanting to place limits on him. Just because something hasn't happened doesn't mean it can't happen. And it's funny that like we've seen like Shohei Ohtani, right? I know that's putting like making a lofty comparison to like saying, could he be like Ohtani like in the NFL? But I go back to Daniel Jeremiah at his pro day, and he was like, this guy is running nothing but like deep ins and go routes and at his pro day. And then they ask him to flip over and play defense, and they're like, he's not even sweating. Like, it's like he just might be just not human. Like he's just like operating at a different level. It's like, I just don't want to cap what Travis Hunter can be because we haven't seen it before. What if he is a guy that can play two ways? What if he is able to translate that to the NFL? So I've just not been wanting to cap. He's an exciting pick too. Like he's fun. Deebo and Godwin you're kind of putting the condom on a little bit. Like Travis Hunter is fun, man. Like I've already drafted good receivers. If I'm taking Travis Hunter here, I've already drafted good receivers on my team. I want to have some fun. I don't want to take a boring guy.
That's a really good way to put it too, because the idea of vets for, it's a little bit tougher when you go like higher end on players, like maybe in like the Hampton versus Montgomery one's a little bit trickier maybe, but this is like you've already gotten a core piece. So Erickson, same thing. I'm gonna just throw both at you here. Godwin was the original pick, ranked quite a bit higher. Debo's a little bit lower, but there's the McLaurin stuff that's floating out there, potential equity in that offense. Travis Hunter, does he take both of these for you because he is more fun?
Yes, I'm going to take the guy that's more fun and not the guys that they're past their prime, right? It's so clear that Chris Godwin's probably not going to do what he did last year. Debo's you're hoping Debo doesn't do what he did last year because he was terrible last year. But these guys have been banged up. They're not the number ones on their respective teams. Not to say that Travis Hunter is, but I just think that Cohen coming from, originally from the Rams, where you just see these concentrated target shares. And Travis Hunter, again, I don't know exactly how they will deploy him on offense, but I know for sure when we look at the end of the year, who has a really high target rate per route run, Travis Hunter is going to be inside the top 10 because when he's on the field, he's going to get targets. But to the extent of what that turns into fantasy production and actual volume, it remains to be seen. But he's going to be targeted at a high rate when he is actually playing on the offense. So I'm going to take the fun pick here as well and go with Travis Hunter.
And the Jaguars are just probably not in a position to rebottle Travis Hunter, right? Like, say the plan is only give him a 65% route share to open up. Who else on this route outside of Brian Thomas Jr. like are they leaning on in the pass game? I don't think if like Travis Hunter is operating at like a 60% route rate and he's a productive player in their offense, they can't afford to take that off the field because you've got Diami Brown, Parker Washington. You're hoping Brenton Strange makes a step forward, right? Like he's just a better football player than this guy.
The fans will riot because these are the same fans, I believe. Didn't they show up wearing the clown outfits, the Jaguars fans, because of Balky? The old GM, so They're gonna riot if they're like, put Travis on offense, get him off defense.
Well, we want to hear from you guys of all the ones we talked about. Who are the guys that you're picking? And if you've also got some who'd you rather debates, you can drop them in the comments below and we can all jump in and we can have some bigger conversations about more players, which we would love to have. We love having Rich Hribar. You can check him over at Sharp Football Analysis. Lord Reeves, you can check him out on Twitter. Make sure to follow him there. Erickson, all across Fantasy Pros. And we got draft guides coming out the podcast. You can find me at Is It The Welsh. And you can check out all the ranks over at fantasypros.com/rankings. Make sure to lock in on the apps and the website because we got tons and tons of content as draft season continues to move on. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us right here on the Fantasy Football Podcast, and we will talk to you next time. Peace out until then.